Good afternoon, folks. Thank you for coming out today for today's talk on Nightcrawler, Dan Gilroy's directorial debut that actually world premiered last night at the Elgin Theater. So I'm going to be doing a talk today for around 20 minutes or so with Jake Gyllenhaal, and we're going to open it up to audience questions after the 15-minute mark. So if you have any questions, be sure to start thinking about them right now. So I'll please welcome to the stage Jake Gyllenhaal. Welcome, Jake.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. How you doing?
You like a big audience?
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
So welcome back to Toronto. Is this your first time back since being here last year for the festival?
No. I was here actually for the festival because this movie I did called Enemy, I think got named like one of the top 10 films in Canada. So we came, Denis Villeneuve.
Yeah. Round of applause.
Thank you. Denis Villeneuve, the director, and I came back for a Q&A. TIFF invited us too, so usually you say, oh yeah, this is the last time, but actually it's not true. I was here in January, so much like this for a Q&A, which we got wild. Denis and I got wild, so expect some craziness today.
Wild. So the film played like gangbusters last night and last year. I mean, you were like the king of TIFF with those two films. You had Enemy and Prisoners here, both ecstatically received, both did pretty well. How is this TIFF experience going for you compared to the last one? Can anything top last year?
Well, last year I was like eating nothing, preparing for this movie while I was doing interviews for those movies. So I was a little cranky. So, so now I'm just psyched because I'm just eating and stuff. So that's particularly exciting for me, and that definitely tops last year. But I would say that, yeah, last year was pretty extraordinary, particularly because it was two films of the same director, and it was a relationship that we had made that is really special, So it wasn't just the films that we made, but it was our friendship and our creative, friendship too, that was on display and that people were responding to in a really nice way, and that was really moving. And this year, I feel like it was sort of last year, and all my relationship with Denis really informed my relationship with Dan Gilroy and how I approach and how I work with a director and what I try and give to them. And my relationship with Dan is equally as intimate in a totally different way. And so I'm super proud of Nightcrawler. So it feels good. It just feels good to be back, man. No, it just feels good anytime your movie's being seen by people, that you made a movie and that it works in any form. Like, it has credits at the beginning and at the end. It's just kind of awesome. No matter how many movies that I, have been involved in, I just always feel like that. The credits end and I'm like, whoa, a movie, that was, and when I say the word painful, I mean it in the movie sense, not in the real sense, but like, wow, all that like strange pain I went through is like, there are credits at the end now. Like, that's so cool, and so, yeah.
And who here actually saw the film last night? I'm not sure if it's screened today. Okay,
like
so we have
2 people.
3-4 people. Yeah.
But everybody liked it, right? Everybody liked
Loved
it.
it,
Yeah,
right?
So good, yeah.
Yeah. Well, before we get into the weight loss, because I want to talk about that briefly, why don't you describe who Lou is, what the film's about, and about the world that Dan's kind of created in this movie?
Nightcrawler is, I think, about 2 separate things. One, the world of stringers in Los Angeles, the world of videoing and crime scenes and accident scenes, the guys who are non-union, who work during the nighttime and film those scenes to sell to the local news. So in the morning, when they appear on the local news, they've edited them together, and that's their job. And them basically chasing tragedy, trying to find the most heinous, kind of disturbing things so that they can be the most shocking to the audience in the morning, and sort of all of the systems that facilitate and make it possible for these guys to get paid and do their job. And then there's the other story really of this guy Lou Bloom, who is a bit of a wanderer and who finds himself at an accident scene and watches these guys do what they do and decides to do it himself. And really, it's the birth of an entrepreneur. That's the story, is the birth of an artist and an entrepreneur. That's how I like to look at it.
Was his profession one you were even familiar with before coming across the script? Did you kind of learn all about, what he does via the script?
Well, when I was doing this film, End of Watch, we were with police officers on streets of South Central LA 2 or 3 times a week for 4 months, Michael Pena and I. And when we would go to crime scenes with the police officers or accidents or whatever we were with them involved in, there would sometimes be these guys from the local news videotaping things. In fact, there were a couple times where Michael and I were, like my publicist got a phone call and they were like, what were Michael Pena and Jake Gyllenhaal doing at a crime scene? Like, and like they're researching for a movie, So I saw those guys, and you obviously see them when you're driving on the freeway. I grew up in Los Angeles, so I've seen them, but I never really registered them. And then, so I didn't really know that much about them until I started researching for this movie.
And I read that you actually drove around with one to prepare for the film. Is that right?
Yeah.
How long did you spend with? Was it one guy in particular that you spent some time with to prepare?
Yeah, they're a set of brothers. They're relatively well known, but I went with them, and then Dan and Robert Elswood, our cinematographer, went with. We all 3 went with them in their cars for a few nights. So it's interesting because this movie, sometimes I say that it's the birth of an artist or an entrepreneur, but I also think it's the birth of a cinematographer because he's a cameraman,
and a great one.
Yeah. And so to be there with a cinematographer in the research was kind of a fascinating thing. And Robert Elswood actually happens to be my godfather, so that it was a very interesting kind of familial thing, particularly with the Gilroy family making the movie all together. And then, so there's, I don't know if that says anything about all of our families, if you've seen the movie, but it was fascinating.
Mm-hmm. I'm guessing the guys you prepared with weren't as unhinged as the character you play in the film, right? No,
they're good dudes, but they do walk the line, this sort of moralistic line, of when do you intervene, and do you, because it means, money, or it means. And there have been times I talked to them about that a lot. I wasn't interested in it in terms of the character because he's not really interested in that. Mm-hmm. But I was interested in that just as a human being. Like, when do you make the decision to say, okay, this person I can help and save, or am I going to make money off of this? And they told me a number of times where they helped people, but most of the time they're there after the fact.
Yeah. Lou does not help people. He does everything but.
I don't know. He does.
He moves a dead body out of the.
He does help people.
Yeah.
He helps the audience.
You have to think that way in order to play him, I imagine.
Yeah, everybody's asked, a lot of people ask me questions about being like, what is you playing a sociopath? What was that like? And I was like, I don't walk into a scene going like, oh, how does a sociopath act in this scene? Yeah. To me, it was all about beauty, To me, it was all about the beauty of what I was seeing and how do I frame it? And, oh my God, how exciting. Like, I just walked into a Damien Hirst sculpture, That's what it was about for me. And that's the way I could look at it, It's about art. Mm-hmm. And then the translation is a bit sociopathic.
You're starting to sound like a sociopath. No comment. So the weight loss, I find it so fascinating that it's never addressed in the film. But you reportedly lost 20 pounds.
Someone doesn't come up to me and go, hey, Jake Gyllenhaal, why'd you lose so much weight?
Well, no. The character, why is he so skinny?
Okay.
What went into that? Was that purely your choice? Was it in the script?
It wasn't in the script. But when I met with Dan, there were a lot of references in the script to coyotes. And growing up in Los Angeles, something about Lou reminded me of a coyote. I can't really explain to you what the first instinct was about that, but I can say that while I was reading it and he referenced the coyote, I had this feeling that Lou was a type of person who was kind of hungry. And when I met with Dan, he was like, we talked about how Los Angeles, which I don't think this movie could have been made in really any other place. That Los Angeles was like, the topography of Los Angeles was, it's in the middle of the desert, obviously. I mean, we're sort of ignoring the fact somewhere that we're in the middle of the desert. But at night, these wild animals come out and they start searching for food. And anybody who's spent any time in Los Angeles can tell you that at night, if you're in the hills or somewhere, you will inevitably hear coyotes attacking some other animal. Do you know what I mean? Like, you'll hear them howling, or you'll hear that's part of LA. And Dan and I were talking about it, and it just hit me, and it hit him. It was like, Lou is a coyote. In fact, there were times when we were not thinking, we thought maybe we weren't going to be able to get the title Nightcrawler, that we thought maybe we'd title the movie Coyote. But then we thought about that movie Coyote Ugly, and I was still up for it, but yeah, so that was it. Was the essence of him was he's a coyote. He's hungry. If you see them pouncing along the street and they look at you like they're going to eat you, like they really do. They'd eat anything. They'd go for anything, any scrap they could find. If they smell blood, they'll move to it, and that's Lou. And so I just tried to make myself into a coyote. Like I did make myself hungry. I did lose that weight. I ended up running at night, for a long time, like 15 miles. I would run to set sometimes. I ended up just sort of isolating myself over a period of time because that's what they are. I mean, they work in packs, but they're mostly alone. And even the way he looks at people and the way he behaves is very much like that. He's preying on desperate people. And that was that.
What does that do to you? I mean, as a performer and as a person, it must have affected you in a kind of deep way that you probably can't really express. But try.
Thought I was going to get out of that one. We shot the whole movie at night, so we weren't really sleeping a lot. I was producing the movie too, and so we were, logistically there were a lot of things to deal with, and then also just, it has these long soliloquies. I memorized the whole movie like a play, so I can
He talks a lot.
Yeah, the very first speech of the movie, he's like, "Excuse me, sir, I'm looking for a job. In fact, I made up my mind to find a career that I can learn and grow into. Who am I? I'm a hard worker. I set high goals, and I've been told I'm persistent. I'm not fooling myself, sir. I've been raised in the self-esteem movement so popular in schools, I used to expect many to be considered, but I know that today's work culture no longer caters to the job loyalty that could be promised to early generations. What I believe, sir, is that good things come to those who work their asses off, and the people such as yourself who reach the top of the mountain didn't just fall there. My motto is, if you want to win the lottery, you have to make the money buy a ticket." Did I tell you I worked in a garage? That guy.
Why don't we spend the rest of the Q&A just with you doing the entire film?
I'm like, no, I hate an audience. But that's how I memorized it, and it's still in my head, So when you say, does it have an effect on me? It's fucking ingrained in me, It's a piece of me forever, and so, yeah, I mean, it affects you. You're up at night. You're not sleeping. You're not really eating. You're living in a world where, you're constantly kind of looking, at least the feelings that I had was just, I'm looking for desperation to prey on, which is when you're hungry, a very interesting kind of feeling to have. And it was all about an exploration of that feeling, and it's a side of myself I know very well now, a side of myself I never knew before this. So whether or not it was always there and I never really paid attention to it, or whether or not it's something that I made happen and is always there, I don't know, but I think it's always been there. You know what I mean? And I just discovered it, and that's the cool thing about acting,
Is this character stuck with you more than most, or is this usually the case?
Well, I love him, Like I know that sounds sick to anybody who's seen the movie, but and maybe it's because I love the process, and I love Dan Gilroy, and I think his script was brilliant, and I think he's made an extraordinary film. So part of me is always there, but no, he's gone, It takes a couple months to like kind of go, whew, but after a while it's gone, but I do really love him. It's like when I would let go of scenes, like when we'd finish shooting a scene where I'd worked on a monologue for a long time or whatever, I would always be so sad because they were so well written. And I think to myself, like, I don't know the next time I'm going to be able to say words that are this well written, And so in that way, I kind of always wish I could hold on to him. But no, they go. He's gone.
So we're going to open it up to the audience. If you have a question, please raise your hand and point in your direction, and be sure to stand up so we can get you on camera. So, yeah, right there. Yep.
Real pleasure to meet you and hear you. I think it's pretty obvious with this movie what your connection is, but I kind of have two questions. One is, given the opportunities you have to choose work, how do you? How do you say no to things that might have a nice paycheck, and how do you say yes? And then you mentioned, how you approach a director and what you give to them. So once you've chosen, what is it that you consider yourself to be giving them and that approach? And is it the same per film, or is it guided?
The first question, to answer the first question, is that it's ever changing. It's ephemeral for me. There is no real answer to why I pick something. I have no plan. Sometimes it's that I'm moved by the human being who wants to tell the story. Sometimes something is connected to me with them for some reason. When I met Denis Villeneuve before we did this movie, Enemy, we sat down. The script I didn't totally understand. It was a Spanish translation into English. There were things and concepts that I thought were really beautiful about it, but I didn't know exactly what he was saying. When I sat down, I had my first meeting with him, I went, oh, the universe is telling me I have to make a movie with this guy. I was like, we're just of like minds, and that's it. And so I just dove in, into the unknown with him, and that spawned a relationship that then spawned another movie. So, and at the beginning of that second movie we did together, I was like, I don't know. The part is not written in a certain way, there's no part necessarily to play here, and he said, we'll find it together, and I went that way. But earlier in my career, I felt like I was just saying like, oh, you should work with this person because they've done this or that. Well, I think that's true in a certain sense, because some people are just extraordinary and you want to work with them, and that's, it's an experience that you'd have. But then other times I feel like it's a feeling, I mean, you're an artist, like it's about feelings, so you have to trust that, and it's not always going to make a great thing, but I don't think that's always the goal either. So that's the answer, I guess, the first question. And the second question, oh yeah. I look at it more and more like a bucket, every day I have a scene. And if I've prepared enough and I know my shit for that day or that week, then I got my bucket. And it's there. Now I have choices, and I go, okay, with all that preparation, I go, that guy's going to need, maybe he has an idea of how he wants to do it, but most directors are going to say, shit, I get to this scene in the movie, and, if I only said it was one choice, then maybe I'm lost here. Maybe he needs to be a little bit more upset. Maybe he needs to be a little bit more cunning. Maybe whatever it is. So I just try and throw choices in a bucket. I'm just like, and particularly when you're making a smaller movie, when you only have like 4 takes, and a movie like this, like Dan would go like, just go nuts in this one. Do you know? I'd be like, okay. There's a scene in the movie where I talk to Riz in the car, and I say to him, you just spill gas on the car, and if you do that again, I'll terminate you and stuff. Well, I do it very calmly to him in the movie. That's the take that he used. But I did one where I was like, literally like, was gonna eat his face off. You know what I mean? So that was one for the bucket, and then there's another one for the bucket. And for me, it's like an expulsion sometimes. Sometimes it's just like, got that off, you know what I mean? And that's why I think artistic expression is so helpful, particularly for kids. And there's a big part of me that is one. But because it allows them to, you know what I mean? So anyway, sorry, that's super long and you didn't ask that, but that's what I want to give to them. I want them to walk away going, he gave me more, and I never pictured, like I had an idea of how the scene was going to be at the best, and he just topped that. And if I can give that to a director, then, you know, that's everything. Yeah.
At the Q&A today, Dan Gilroy mentioned Lou's soundtrack in his head, and I was wondering if you could elaborate on that and which scenes it occurs.
I had music playing at different times, like in the car and stuff like that. One of the big things for me was Satie. Like I listened to a lot of classical music when I was in the car, and also between Lou's music in his head was really funny because last night, I don't want to give anything away. I can't talk about it. There's a scene in the movie where Dan and I were cracking up because it's like this sort of outlandish cue, and like in most movies, like people would want to play a cue that's gonna he's gonna give to the audience like what he believes, what the director, he or she believes is the emotion. Obviously, we all know what a score cue is, so I'm not gonna describe it. But Dan does something where the music cues in this movie are the cues in Lou's head. So you're watching the movie and you're going like, that's so weird. At the beginning, you're like, what is this music? Like, and then by the end, you're like, yeah. You know? And like, it's kind of fucking brilliant. Like, even I was like, what is this music cue? Like this, oh, like, and Dan and I last night were laughing our heads off, and you know, and it's so sick in some of the moments, you know. But it's the music in Lou's head. Yeah.
Unfortunately, we have to end it there, but thank you everyone for coming out. And
I
thank you,
talk too
Jake.
much. I'm sorry, guys.
Oh, please. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thank you to Indiewire.